Flight number: Atlantic Pacific Airlines Flight 728. Aircraft: Boeing 737 MAX 8. Date: October 18. Route: Chicago O'Hare to Seattle. Weather: light rain over Chicago. Broken clouds. Moderate winds. Clear skies expected near Seattle. Passengers: 168. Crew: Captain Richard Hayes, 59 years old. Nearly 18,000 flight hours. First Officer Maya Carter, 34 years old. Former Air Force transport pilot. Over 5,200 flight hours. Known for her calm decision-making. Cabin crew: 4 experienced flight attendants. Everything looked like another routine morning departure. Families settled into their seats. Business travelers opened laptops. Children pressed their faces against the windows. No one imagined the real emergency would begin before the engines even started. A narration: 6:18 a.m. The rain tapped softly against the massive terminal windows at Chicago O'Hare as passengers streamed toward Gate B-24. Flight 728 was scheduled to depart on time for Seattle aboard a nearly new Boeing 737 MAX 8. Inside the cabin, flight attendants greeted travelers with warm smiles while overhead bins slammed shut one after another. Everything appeared routine. Outside, baggage loaders worked quickly beneath the aircraft's wings. Fuel trucks disconnected. Catering vehicles pulled away. The aircraft was almost ready. Inside the cockpit, First Officer Maya Carter completed her pre-flight checks with quiet precision. Every switch, every display, every circuit breaker. She had flown military transport aircraft through mountain storms, humanitarian missions, and emergency evacuations. Commercial aviation demanded the same discipline. She opened the electronic flight bag and reviewed the route. Flight management system programmed. Fuel quantity verified. Weather reviewed. Performance calculations complete. She adjusted her headset and looked toward the cockpit door as footsteps approached. Captain Richard Hayes entered, carrying his flight case. Without saying good morning, he glanced at the nameplate. First Officer Maya Carter. She smiled politely. Morning, Captain. He didn't return the smile. Instead, he silently reviewed her file on the cockpit tablet. Thousands of hours. Excellent evaluations. Military background. Perfect training record. Yet something about her presence immediately irritated him. He placed his bag down harder than necessary. I wasn't expecting you. Maya remained calm. I'm your assigned first officer today. Hayes frowned. No. She looked up. I'm sorry. I told scheduling I wanted someone else. Maya blinked. There must be some misunderstanding. There isn't. Silence filled the cockpit. Outside, passengers continued boarding completely unaware that their flight had already stopped moving. Pilot dialogue. Captain Hayes. I'm not comfortable flying this trip with you. First Officer Carter. May I ask why, Captain? Captain Hayes. I don't need to explain my preferences. First Officer Carter. My qualifications meet every company requirement. Captain Hayes. This conversation is over. Operations dialogue via headset. Dispatcher. Captain Hayes, boarding is almost complete. Is everything ready? Captain Hayes. Negative. Dispatcher. What's the issue? Captain Hayes. I want another first officer. Dispatcher. Captain Carter is fully qualified. Captain Hayes. I said I want someone else. The line went silent. Passenger reactions. Seat 8A. A businessman checked his watch. They're running late. Seat 16C. A mother buckled her daughter's seat belt. Don't worry, sweetheart, we'll be flying soon. In row 27, a college student looked through the window. Why haven't the engines started? No one knew that an argument was unfolding only a few feet ahead. Technical explanation. Before every flight, both pilots complete independent safety checks. A captain cannot reject a legally assigned, qualified first officer based on personal preference alone. Any serious concern must be based on documented safety, medical, or operational reasons. Delaying a flight without a valid operational reason can trigger an immediate review by airline management. Suspense ending. Inside airline operations, phones began ringing. A supervisor pulled up Captain Hayes' history. Someone quietly said, "This isn't the first complaint." But before anyone could intervene, another problem appeared on Flight 728's maintenance system. And this one could not be ignored. The argument inside the cockpit had lasted nearly 12 minutes. Outside, the Boeing 737 MAX 8 sat motionless at gate B-24, connected to ground power while passengers grew increasingly impatient. Inside the airline's operations control center, large digital displays tracked hundreds of flights across the country. Flight 728 had turned from green to yellow, indicating a delay. Operations Supervisor Daniel Brooks frowned as another notification appeared on his screen. EICAS maintenance message received. It wasn't an emergency. It wasn't even uncommon. Modern airliners continuously monitor thousands of onboard systems, automatically reporting maintenance messages through digital communication, links to technicians on the ground. Most alerts are minor, but company policy required every one of them to be reviewed. Brooks immediately called maintenance control. Take a look at Flight 728. They've just transmitted a systems message. Within moments, Senior Maintenance Controller Alina Ruiz accessed the aircraft's health monitoring system. She read the report carefully. Her expression changed. This isn't a fault. She zoomed in. It's an intermittent warning. Those words immediately caught everyone's attention. Intermittent faults are among the most difficult problems in aviation. They appear, then disappear, sometimes leaving almost no trace, sometimes returning at the worst possible moment. Meanwhile, inside the cockpit, Captain Hayes remained focused on replacing his first officer rather than reviewing the maintenance notification. Maya Carter noticed the amber advisory on the multifunction display. "Captain, we've received a maintenance message." Hayes barely looked. "Ground will handle it." Maya hesitated. "The procedure recommends reviewing the system status." Hayes sighed. "I know the procedure, but we're dealing with another issue first." Maya didn't argue. Instead, she quietly opened the maintenance page herself. The message wasn't dramatic. It simply read, "Air data computer 2, intermittent data drop." She felt a chill. Not because the message meant the aircraft was unsafe, but because intermittent air data faults could become much more serious if ignored. Outside, rain intensified, streaking across the cockpit windshield. The clock kept ticking. Passengers waited. Ground crews waited. Air traffic control waited. But inside the cockpit, two very different priorities were colliding. Pilot dialogue. First Officer Carter. "Captain, we've received an air data computer advisory." Captain Hayes. "It's intermittent." First Officer Carter. "Yes, sir." Captain Hayes. "They'll clear it." First Officer Carter. Would you like me to contact maintenance control? Captain Hayes. No. First Officer Carter. I believe we should discuss it. Captain Hayes. I've already made my decision. Maya nodded. Understood. But she quietly made a note in her electronic logbook. Maintenance Control Dialogue. Maintenance Controller Ruiz. Operations, this is maintenance. We'd like to speak directly with the flight crew. Operations Supervisor. Connecting you now. Ruiz. Captain Hayes, we've reviewed the message. Captain Hayes. Go ahead. Ruiz. We recommend performing an additional air data system check before departure. A pause. Captain Hayes. Is the aircraft legal? Ruiz. Yes. But we'd still like the additional verification. Hayes leaned back. Fine. Passenger reactions. The cabin had grown noticeably quieter. People checked departure boards on their phones. A young boy asked his father, "Why aren't we moving? We're probably waiting for permission." Across the aisle, an elderly woman noticed the flight attendants exchanging concerned glances. Something didn't feel normal anymore. Technical explanation. The Air Data Computer, ADC, calculates essential flight information such as airspeed, altitude, and outside air temperature using data from the aircraft's pitot static system. An intermittent fault doesn't necessarily make the aircraft unsafe. However, because pilots rely on accurate airspeed and altitude information during every phase of flight, even a temporary issue deserves careful evaluation before departure. Modern airlines often choose to delay a flight rather than risk an unresolved technical problem. Suspense ending. As maintenance control prepared the additional system test, another notification arrived, this time from the airline's Crew Resources Department. Operations Supervisor Brooks opened the message. His eyes widened. He whispered, "Not again." Captain Hayes wasn't just delaying the flight. He had been the subject of multiple recent complaints for refusing assigned crew members. And someone at headquarters had just ordered a full review. But before management could make a decision, Flight 728 finally received clearance to begin engine start. The aircraft was about to leave the gate. And the real crisis was still ahead. Scene 20, What Really Happened. Narration. Flight 728 came to a complete stop on the runway. For a few seconds, no one moved. The only sounds were the engines idling and hundreds of passengers breathing in disbelief. Then the lead flight attendant made the announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Seattle." The cabin erupted into applause. Some passengers cried. Others hugged complete strangers. Parents held their children tighter than ever before. Inside the cockpit, Captain Richard Hayes sat silently, staring through the windshield. The same first officer he had tried to remove before departure had just helped save every life on board. First Officer Maya Carter removed her headset and quietly completed the final checklist. She showed no anger, no celebration, only the calm professionalism that had defined her throughout the flight. Airport firefighters inspected the aircraft, while emergency vehicles surrounded the runway as a precaution. After confirming there was no fire or structural damage, passengers deplaned safely. Many stopped at the cockpit door. One elderly passenger smiled at Maya. "Thank you for bringing us home." She simply replied, "It was a team effort." The investigation. Within hours, investigators secured the aircraft. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder were removed and sent for analysis. Over the next several weeks, Investigators reconstructed every second of the flight. The data showed that the aircraft experienced an intermittent air data fault that briefly produced unreliable indications. The crew followed the appropriate checklists, coordinated with air traffic control, and landed safely. The investigation also reviewed events before departure. Records showed Captain Hayes had delayed the flight while objecting to his assigned first officer despite her qualifications. The airline concluded that his conduct violated company policies on professionalism, crew resource management, and equal employment standards. Investigators found no evidence that Maya Carter had made any operational errors. In fact, her timely recognition of the developing situation, disciplined checklist use, and clear communication were credited with helping the crew manage the event safely. Airline decision. 1 month later, Atlantic Pacific Airlines released its findings. Captain Richard Hayes was removed from flight status pending disciplinary review. After the investigation concluded, his employment with the airline ended because of repeated violations of company policy and professional conduct standards. Several supervisors who failed to address earlier complaints received additional management training. The airline also expanded mandatory crew resource management training, emphasizing communication, respect, and decision-making under pressure. Maya Carter was recognized for her professionalism during the event. She later accepted a role as a fleet training captain, mentoring new pilots in technical skills, teamwork, and cockpit leadership. What the passengers remembered. Months later, passengers were interviewed. A father traveling with his young son said, "I never knew anything was wrong until after we landed. Looking back, I'm grateful the crew stayed calm." A business traveler recalled, "The first officer's voice was steady the entire time. That confidence helped keep the cabin calm." A flight attendant reflected, "Professionalism isn't about being the loudest person in the cockpit. It's about making the safest decisions." Aviation lessons learned. This flight became a powerful reminder of several aviation principles. Professionalism matters more than ego. Safety decisions must be based on facts, not personal bias. Effective crew resource management depends on mutual respect and open communication. Following checklists and standard procedures saves lives. Every qualified crew member deserves to be evaluated on competence, not assumptions. Modern aviation is built on teamwork. The safest cockpit is one where every voice can be heard when safety is at stake. Emotional ending. As the sun set over Seattle that evening, Flight 728 sat quietly at its gate. Maintenance crews prepared the aircraft for another day of service. Passengers continued with their lives, many never realizing how close they had come to a much more serious outcome. Captain Hayes left the airport through a side exit, away from the cameras. His career had ended not because of a single emergency, but because repeated failures in judgment had finally caught up with him. Maya Carter walked through the terminal carrying her flight bag. No reporters. No celebration. Just another professional pilot heading home after doing her job. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never ask to be recognized. Because true leadership isn't measured by rank. It's measured by integrity, competence, and the courage to do what's right, even when it's difficult. Outro. Narrator. Every commercial flight is a reminder that aviation safety depends on discipline, teamwork, and respect. The events in this story are fictional but inspired by real aviation principles and crew resource management practices. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more cinematic aviation documentaries. Until next time, fly safe. The end.